The gavel echoed across the room, a sound that seemed to silence even the very air around us. I stood there, a man transformed from the shadows of betrayal into the light of vindication. My heart thudded in my chest, a drumbeat of triumph yet tinged with a persistent ache. I looked around the courtroom, my gaze settling on faces frozen in a mix of shock and disbelief. But none was more captivating to me than those of Laura and her lover, their expressions a mixture of dread and dawning realization. The evidence lay before the judge, neatly arranged, irrefutable in its clarity. Financial documents, photographs, recorded conversations. Each piece was a shard of truth that had once pierced my own heart, now wielded like a sword. The judge's eyes scanned the papers, then paused, lifting a gaze both questioning and incredulous. This evidence, the judge began, her voice a controlled tremor, is substantial and damning. Mr. Richard Thompson, how do you respond to these accusations against your wife and her accomplice? I took a slow breath, the taste of the moment bittersweet on my tongue. Your Honor, I replied, my voice steady, the calm at the eye of a storm. I stand here not just for myself, but for the dignity that was stolen from me. What you see before you is the culmination of a journey through betrayal, darkness, and ultimately, resolution. For a moment, my mind drifted back, tracing the path that had led to this pivotal moment. It was as if I were standing outside of myself, witnessing the unraveling of a life I had thought was perfect. The courtroom began to blur, a portal opening to a time not so long ago, a time when the seeds of doubt had first taken root. In those early days, the flickers of suspicion had been nothing more than fleeting shadows dancing at the corners of my consciousness. Laura, with her laughter and warmth, had seemed an embodiment of everything I held dear. Our home, once a sanctuary, had become a stage upon which subtle cues played out their roles. I remembered the neighbor's offhand comment about Laura's busy social life. Nothing more than idle chatter. It had planted in me a seed of doubt that would only grow with time. As I stood in that courtroom, I thought back to the first moment of true realization. The night when Laura had taken a phone call, her voice hushed and secretive, claiming it was work. I had watched her from the shadows of our living room, her silhouette draped in the muted glow of the streetlights outside. That had been the moment the veil began to lift. The subsequent weeks had been a slow march through a harrowing landscape, each discovery a stone added to the weight pressing upon my soul. The new perfume, expensive and foreign, had been a tantalizing clue. Her late nights, explained away with excuses that rang hollow, had only deepened the chasm of trust between us. My once unwavering belief in her had begun to crumble, leaving only the bare bones of a failing marriage. But it was the discovery of that note, hidden away in her closet, a lover's careless keepsake, that had shattered the last threads holding my facade of willful ignorance. The words, intimate and raw, had raked across my heart like nails on a chalkboard. And yet, even in the depths of despair, I had felt the first stirrings of resolution. Returning to the present, I met Laura's eyes across the courtroom. There was no solace there, only a mirror reflecting the consequences of her choices. Her lover sat beside her, his once confident demeanor unraveling under the weight of exposure. The courtroom was silent, as if holding its breath in anticipation of what would come next. In that silence, I remembered the quiet promise I had made to myself, a vow of reclamation, not just of my life, but of the dignity and respect that had been so carelessly discarded. This moment, standing here, was the culmination of that resolve. Today, I continued, addressing the judge with a calm I hadn't thought possible, I reclaim what was unjustly taken. I reclaim my honor, my dignity, and my future. The judge nodded, her eyes acknowledging the complexity of our shared human condition, a blend of fallibility and resilience. And so, in that room filled with the echoes of broken trust and the promise of justice, I stood firm, a man no longer defined by betrayal but by the strength to rise above it. As the proceedings began to wind down, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The journey had been arduous, fraught with moments of doubt and despair. Yet here I was, standing on the verge of a new beginning. The seeds of revenge had borne fruit, yet as I glanced at Laura one last time, I wondered what lay beyond the veil of justice. Perhaps a future marked not just by victory, but by healing and hope. The world seemed to bask in the golden glow of an afternoon sun, casting long shadows across the dining room as the sound of clinking cutlery and soft laughter filled the air. I sat at the head of the table, watching my family engage in a symphony of the everyday, a balm against the creeping unease that lurked beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect life. Laura, my wife, sat across from me, her smile radiant as she coaxed a giggle from our youngest daughter. Her laughter was the same as it had always been, a melody that once filled me with warmth. Yet now, behind the genuine joy, I sensed a note of discord, a hidden dissonance that only my attuned ears could detect. "Daddy, can we go to the park after dinner?" my son asked, pulling me back from the edges of my introspection. His eyes, bright with youthful eagerness, were a stark reminder of the innocence I desperately clung to, innocence that felt increasingly fragile. "Of course, buddy," I replied, forcing warmth into my voice. "We can play some catch." The table erupted into cheers and plans for the evening, a tapestry of familiarity and comfort. But try as I might to immerse myself, a subtle distance separated me from this tableau, a chasm only I seemed to perceive. As I watched Laura interact with the children, her gestures fluid and practiced, a memory flickered to life, a neighbor's passing remark about Laura's busy social life. At the time, I had dismissed it, chalking it up to harmless chatter. But now, it lingered at the back of my mind, an echo growing louder with each passing day. After dinner, as the kids dashed into the garden, their voices carrying with the breeze, Laura and I lingered at the table, the remnants of our meal scattered between us. She offered me a smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. I noticed it then, a flicker of something unspoken, an unguarded moment where a hidden truth lay just beneath the surface. "The kids seem excited," she said, her voice smooth and practiced. "It's nice to have a family evening." "Yes," I agreed, unable to keep the edge from my tone. "It's important to cherish these moments." Our conversation danced on the edge of trivialities, each word a careful construction meant to obscure rather than reveal. And in that moment, I realized the depth of my own emotional investment, the fear of losing what was once sacred, the reluctance to confront the truth that gnawed at my insides. As the night descended, I retreated to the solitude of my office. The room was dimly lit, shadows pooling in the corners like forgotten secrets. I stared at the papers on my desk, reports from work that now seemed irrelevant in the face of my growing suspicion. Laura's laughter echoed faintly from the living room, a sound that once buoyed my spirit, but now only deepened my resolve to seek the truth. It was a quiet sound, almost imperceptible, yet it resonated within me, rekindling the doubts that had begun to form like frost on the edges of my consciousness. I remembered how Laura had always been the heart of our family, her presence a constant, as dependable as the tides. But lately, there had been subtle shifts, a new perfume, late-night calls she claimed were work-related, and the increasing frequency of her so-called girls' night out. Each change, innocuous on its own, wove together into a pattern I could no longer ignore. The whir of the ceiling fan, a monotonous rhythm, seemed to echo my racing thoughts. It was as if the world around me was conspiring to keep me from the truth, a truth I was both desperate and terrified to uncover. Yet, I knew that to find peace, I had to face whatever lay hidden in the recesses of our lives. A week later, it was the chance remark of a colleague that pushed me further down the path of suspicion. Over a casual coffee break, he mentioned seeing Laura at a restaurant, an innocent observation that, to him, bore no significance. But to me, it was a jigsaw piece falling into place, aligning with the image I was so afraid to see. I watched Laura's reflection in the window as she entered the house that evening, her silhouette framed by the soft light of the porch. Her movements were graceful, yet there was an unfamiliarity in her demeanor, a stranger wearing the mask of my wife. It was in that moment, as I sat in the half-light of our living room, that I resolved to uncover the truth. The realization was not born of anger, nor of jealousy, but of necessity. A need to reclaim my life from the shadows that threatened to engulf it. In the days that followed, I began to observe her more closely, each action, each word, a potential clue in the unraveling of the life we once shared. It was a silent vigil, a watchful presence that bore the weight of my growing doubts. Yet it was one I could not relinquish. As I navigated the delicate balance between suspicion and reality, the seeds of betrayal took root, each discovery a step closer to the inevitable confrontation. And while the external facade of my life remained unchanged, within me, a quiet storm gathered, the harbinger of the truth I could no longer deny. The world appeared in sepia tones as I navigated the monotony of my daily routine, a shadowy existence marked by the slow erosion of trust. Each day I spent observing Laura brought a new flicker of awareness, a quiet revelation whispered in the unguarded moments between us. Her once comforting presence now felt foreign, a specter moving through our home with the practiced grace of a stranger. The phone calls were the first to rouse suspicion. Claimed as work conversations, they bled through the walls of our home, each muffled response drawing another line of doubt across my heart. I watched her from across the room as she spoke in hushed tones that slid beneath the door to my consciousness. Her voice, once a melody of familiarity, now carried notes of mystery that pressed against my mind with relentless persistence. Curiosity morphed into vigilance. I tracked her movements with the precision of a watchmaker, each tick of the clock amplifying the dissonance between her words and actions. The new perfume, its scent both alluring and alien, was a tangible reminder of the distance growing between us. A scent that lingered on her clothes, on our bedsheets, intertwining with the air we shared. One evening, she returned from a supposed girls' night out, a flush on her cheeks and eyes bright with a vivacity not seen in our time together. As she slipped into our bed, her movements fluid and devoid of guilt, I lay beside her, rigid and awake, my mind a theater of shadows orchestrating the fragments of our life into a coherent narrative. I could feel the betrayal slithering beneath the veneer of our domesticity, a serpent coiled tightly within the confines of our shared history. The warmth of our home was a facade, obscuring the growing void that stretched between us. A void filled with whispers, glances, and the heavy silence of unasked questions. It was on a chilly autumn morning, the sky a tapestry of gray and gold, that my resolve solidified. Laura had left early, her absence leaving an echo of her perfume in the air, a scent more suffocating than sweet. As the children headed off to school, their laughter fading into the distance, I sat alone at our breakfast table, a cup of coffee growing cold in my grasp. The decision came with the clarity of a sudden storm, a realization that to find peace, I must confront the shadows that danced around the periphery of my consciousness. I began to dig deeper, following the thread of truth through the labyrinth of our life. Her phone left unattended was a silent accomplice, whispers of her world tucked away in messages and calls that spun a tale of their own. The messages were innocuous at first, brief exchanges with friends, colleagues, each paragraph a veneer of normalcy. But nestled between the mundane, I found the messages that tied each fragment of doubt together. Words of affection, longing, and secrecy passed between her and an unnamed recipient, their meaning as clear as the daylight streaming through our windows. My heart sunk into the depths of my chest, a weight of betrayal and confirmation bearing down with the force of a tidal wave. I scrolled through the messages again, disbelief warring with the stark reality of their existence. Each line, each promise exchanged, was a step along the path to the truth, a path I had been too fearful to walk alone. Yet it was the combination of these small shards of evidence, these whispered suspicions, that painted the undeniable picture of infidelity. The names, the places, the endearments, all woven together into a tapestry I could no longer unsee. Laura returned that evening, her demeanor unchanged, her smile as warm and welcoming as ever. She greeted me with a kiss, unaware of the knowledge now resting heavy on my shoulders. Her proximity was both a comfort and a torment, a reminder of the life we had once known, now tainted by the presence of another. As she moved through the rituals of our evening, I watched in silence, my resolve fortified by the bitterness of my newfound knowledge. The truth lay before me, a purifying fire that threatened to consume the remnants of our shared life. Yet, in its flames, I found a resolve, a quiet determination to reclaim what was mine and to face the betrayal head-on. The night wore on, and as Laura slipped into slumber beside me, I lay awake, eyes open to the shadows that danced across our bedroom walls. There, in the silence of the night, I crafted my plan, a strategy born not of anger but of necessity. For in this quiet darkness, I understood. The path to reclaiming my life lay not just in uncovering the betrayal but in confronting it, exposing it, and emerging on the other side. As the dawn broke, washing the room in muted colors of renewal, I resolved to act. The time for whispered suspicions was over. The dance of shadows had met its match in the light of truth. The morning light filtered softly through the kitchen window, casting long, flickering patterns across the floor. I sat at the table, a mug of untouched coffee cooling between my hands, the steam curling away like the remnants of a fading dream. The knowledge I held, that undeniable truth nestled cruelly within the corners of my heart, pressed against me with an unrelenting weight. Laura's voice drifted from the other room, a casual melody of everyday life that belied the chasm that now separated us. Each word she uttered was a reminder of the gulf that deceit had carved into our shared existence, a divide that could no longer be ignored. I had reached the brink, where silence was no longer an option, where the echoes of betrayal demanded voice and action in equal measure. And so, with resolve born from the depths of necessity, I prepared to confront the storm head-on, to strip away the layers of duplicity that had shrouded our life in shadow. Laura entered the kitchen, her eyes crinkling into a familiar smile that felt both foreign and comforting. "You're up early?" she remarked, crossing to the coffee pot, unaware of the tempest swirling just beneath my composed exterior. "Couldn't sleep?" I replied, my voice a studied calm, though inside, a tumult raged like a river swollen by unrelenting rain. She poured herself a cup, her presence both a beacon of what we had once shared and a reminder of the secrets that lay between us. The moment stretched, silence heavy with unspoken truths. I watched her, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the way her fingers wrapped around the handle of her mug, details once cherished now tinged with a new understanding. In her eyes, I sought the flicker of recognition, the hint of guilt that would confirm the truth I already knew. But there was nothing, only the practiced ease of habitual affection, a veneer of normalcy that now felt as brittle as autumn leaves beneath a footfall. "I need to talk to you about something," I began, my voice steady even as my heart pounded a relentless rhythm in my chest. Laura paused, her gaze meeting mine, curiosity and a hint of concern in her eyes. "Oh?" she prompted, unaware of the tidal wave about to crash upon the fragile shores of our conversation. I inhaled deeply, the air tasting of morning and resolution. "I found something," I continued, laying the words carefully between us. "Messages, notes, things that suggest." Her expression faltered, a shadow flitting across her features before she masked it with a look of confusion. "Richard, what are you talking about?" A part of me marveled at her ability to feign ignorance, to hold onto the illusion even as it crumbled around her. But the time for pretenses had passed, and I pressed on, my resolve hardening with each breath. "I know about him, Laura. The calls, the messages. I know about the affair." The silence that followed my words was complete, a void filled only by the ticking of the clock, each second a reminder of the unraveling. Laura's face blanched, the color draining away like paint washed by rain. Her eyes widened, a mixture of fear and defiance warring for dominance. "Richard, she began, but the words faltered, caught in her throat as the reality of the moment settled between us like an immovable stone. I watched the facade crack, the deception peel away to reveal the raw edges of truth beneath. "Why, Laura?" I asked, the question like a knife twisting in my chest. "Why betray everything we've built, everything I believed in?" Her eyes glistened, tears threatening to spill over though she fought to maintain control. It wasn't It didn't mean to happen, she stammered, each word a fragile thread in the tapestry of excuses she wove. I shook my head, the pain of her confession a visceral thing, jagged and unyielding. And yet it did, I countered, my voice carrying the weight of betrayal and the echo of lost dreams. And now, here we are. Her silence was deafening, a void filled only by the steady pulse of my heart, each beat a testament to the decision that lay before us. Laura lowered her gaze, the defiance slipping away to reveal the vulnerability beneath. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered, the words a balm and a wound in equal measure. But the time for healing and solace had not yet come. There was only the immediate need for confrontation, for truth to be laid bare before us. I can't change what's happened, I said, the finality of my tone resonating like a distant thunder in the confines of our kitchen. But I can choose what comes next. Laura nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek, a testament to the shattering of the life we had once known. Yet within that fracture lay the potential for something new, something untainted by whispers and shadows. The confrontation had come and gone, leaving behind a landscape scarred by anguish, but also ripe with the promise of rebirth. And as I stood before the wreckage of what had been, I felt the first stirrings of a new resolve, a resolve to build again, to rise above the ashes of betrayal and into the light of a future defined by truth. Laura sat across from me, her face a mosaic of emotions. Guilt, defiance, fear. The kitchen seemed to shrink around us, the air taut with unspoken words. The confrontation had torn away the fabric of our shared reality, leaving raw edges exposed. In the quiet aftermath, I could feel the weight of her betrayal settling into every corner of our home, a tangible presence that could not be ignored. For a long moment, we sat in silence, the ticking clock punctuating the void between us. My heart ached with a mix of loss and the inevitability of what must come next. Her words lingered in the air, a fragile bridge still spanning the chasm between us. I never wanted to hurt you, she had said, and yet, here we were, standing amidst the ruins of trust. I finally rose from my seat, the motion seemingly displacing the tension in the room. I turned away from her, needing a moment to gather my thoughts, to quell the storm of emotions swirling inside me. The betrayal was like a wound, fresh and stinging, a cut that refused to close. Laura's presence behind me was a testament to everything we had lost, each breath a reminder of the promises she had broken. Richard, she called softly, her voice trembling, laced with remorse. I'm so sorry. I remained silent, holding onto the anger that had fueled me through those dark days of suspicion. It was a protective barrier, one that shielded me from the deeper pain lurking beneath the surface. In time, perhaps, sorrow might replace it, but not now, not when the wounds were yet so fresh. You say you didn't mean to hurt me. I finally spoke, my voice steady but edged with a sharpness I couldn't disguise. But you did, more than I ever thought possible. Her silence was answer enough, a tacit admission of fault that settled heavily between us. I turned to face her again, noting the tear that hung precariously on the edge of her lashes, a vulnerable testament to the turmoil within her. Yet, vulnerability could not erase the betrayal, nor did it negate the steps I felt compelled to take in its wake. I need time, I said simply, each word a carefully placed stone on the path forward. Time to figure out what this means for us, for me. Laura nodded, her eyes downcast, acknowledging the chasm that now separated us more completely than words ever could. I understand, she whispered, her voice a fragile echo of the confidence she once carried. The echoes of our conversation lingered as I left the kitchen, each step a retreat from the life we had known. In my study, I closed the door behind me, seeking solace in the quiet, away from the memories and the ache of what had been lost. The room felt cool and detached, a sanctuary from the emotional whirlwind that our confrontation had unleashed. The evidence of her affair lay before me. Messages, notes, a collection of truths that had once seemed incomprehensible. They were my allies now, tools to reclaim my life from the shadows of deceit. As I sifted through them, My mind raced through possibilities, charting a course that led away from the wreckage of my marriage towards something resembling clarity. I thought of our children, their innocence a beacon in the darkness. How would I tell them? How would I shield them from the storm gathering between their mother and me? They deserve truth, but also a sense of security, a balance I would have to maintain even as the ground shifted beneath us all. The thought of them strengthened my resolve. Whatever lay ahead, I would face it armed with the knowledge of Laura's betrayal, but also with the commitment to protect them, to rise from this turmoil with dignity intact. Yet within the anger and hurt, a small voice urged caution, reminded me that revenge, seductive as it seemed, was not the path to healing. My heart wrestled with the notion of justice, of exposing Laura and her lover. But at what cost? Would it restore what was broken, or simply leave me with Pyrrhic victory? I closed my eyes, surrendering to the question that gnawed at my conscience. The decision lay before me, a crossroads where the paths of vengeance and resolution diverged. In the quiet of my study, I sought the wisdom to choose rightly, to tread the narrow line between righteous anger and compassion. As the afternoon waned, I opened the window, allowing a cool breeze to sweep through the room, cleansing the space with the scent of autumn. It carried a promise of change, of renewal, whispering that even in the ashes of betrayal lay the seeds of something new. For now, I would gather the pieces of my life, assess the damage, and decide what could be salvaged. The journey to healing would be long, fraught with obstacles and emotional scars, but I would face it, steeled by the knowledge that, despite the betrayal, the future remained unwritten, filled with possibilities I had yet to explore. In that moment, I resolved to rise from the shadows, to rebuild on a foundation of truth, even if it meant walking through fire to emerge on the other side. Laura's betrayal had marred our past, but it would not define my future. The envelope sat on the edge of my desk like an invitation to a masquerade ball I had no desire to attend. Its contents were the culmination of my determination. A carefully curated dossier of every betrayal, lie, and deceit that Laura and her lover had spun. Yet, revenge sat uneasily on my shoulders, its allure undeniable, but its cost still looming in shadows. I had spent countless nights in this room, piecing together the puzzle of their infidelity with the precision of a surgeon. Every late-night phone call, every clandestine meeting carefully documented, not just for my vindication, but as a salve for the wounds their duplicity had inflicted. The evidence was irrefutable, each piece falling into place with a quiet finality that spoke of the inescapable truth. My thoughts were a cacophony of anger and regret, each competing for dominance as I considered the path ahead. The question of exposure loomed large, a double-edged sword that demanded to be wielded with care. I had no desire to destroy Laura, but her actions had left a void that must be addressed. A reconciliation between justice and the remnants of love that stubbornly clung to my heart. I needed advice, a voice of reason to navigate this treacherous terrain. And so, I found myself sitting across from an old friend, a seasoned attorney who had weathered storms of his own. He listened patiently as I laid bare the tangled web of deceit, his eyes reflecting both empathy and professional curiosity. "Richard," he began, his voice a soothing balm amidst the turmoil. "Your case is strong. Legally, you have every right to pursue this, to hold them accountable for what they've done. But you must ask yourself, what do you truly hope to gain from this?" I leaned back, the weight of his question pressing against my chest. "I want closure," I admitted, the words feeling inadequate against the magnitude of my anguish. "I want her to understand the depth of her betrayal, to face the consequences of her choices." He nodded, his gaze steady. "And what about the children? How will this impact them?" The mention of my children was a gut punch, a stark reminder of the innocence caught in the crossfire. They deserved stability, a life unmarred by the sins of their parents. "I want to protect them," I replied, the conviction in my voice tempered by the reality of our circumstances. "Then tread carefully," he advised, his words echoing with the wisdom of experience. "Revenge can be satisfying but often comes at a price. Make sure it's one you're willing to pay." I left his office with a mind full of tumult and a heart weighed down by the decisions that lay ahead. The envelope still lay waiting, its stark presence a reminder that a reckoning was necessary. A necessary step to untangle the web that had ensnared my life. Evening fell as I returned home, the house silent and somber, reflective of the emotional storm brewing within its walls. Laura's presence greeted me, her silhouette framed by the dim light of the living room. She turned as I entered, her eyes searching mine for answers she knew she might not want to hear. "Did you speak with someone?" she asked, her voice tentative, layered with the vulnerability of the unknown. "I did," I replied, seating myself across from her, the envelope still clutched in my hand. The weight of our shared silence was palpable, an oppressive blanket that threatened to suffocate. "And?" she pressed, her gaze unwavering despite the fear lurking just beneath the surface. I studied her, the woman I had once thought was my partner in life, now a stranger cloaked in past familiarities. "There are consequences, Laura," I said quietly, the gravity of the moment not lost on either of us. "Consequences to actions that cannot be ignored." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, a testament to the damage done, the irreparable rift that lay between us. "I understand," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of unspoken apologies and remorse. I set the envelope on the table between us, a symbol of the choice that lay before us. "This isn't about vengeance," I declared, my voice steady firm. "It's about reclaiming what was lost. I need to take control to protect myself and the children." Laura nodded, a single tear escaping down her cheek, a silent acknowledgement of the path we must now navigate together, albeit separately. "I'm willing to face whatever comes," she said, her voice breaking with the sincerity of her admission. In that moment, amidst the ruins of our shared dreams, I felt a flicker of empathy, a glimmer of understanding that perhaps the road to resolution lay not just in retribution, but in the shared acknowledgement of our humanity. The path forward was uncertain, fraught with challenges and decisions that would test the very fabric of who we were. But as I sat across from Laura, the dossier of her betrayal laid bare, I understood that justice was not the end, but the beginning. A step toward rebuilding, reimagining a future where truth and healing would guide us beyond the shadows of betrayal. The night was a shroud, heavy and unrelenting, as I prepared for the evening's event. A lavish party hosted by someone whose face I had no desire to see, yet whose presence was integral to my plan. The air was charged with anticipation, a prelude to the revelation that was about to unfold. I stood before the mirror, adjusting the knot of my tie, the reflection looking back at me, a stranger whose determination was tempered by the burden of truth. Laura had been uncharacteristically quiet in the days leading up to this night, her demeanor subdued as if she too sensed the impending storm. We had moved through the motions of daily life in a state of mutual understanding, a silent agreement that the veneer of civility would soon be shattered. Her eyes followed me as I made my final preparations, the weight of our shared history a tangible thing between us. The venue was grand, opulent, a testament to the success built on foundations as shaky as the life we had once shared. Guests mingled beneath the glittering chandeliers, their laughter a superficial melody that belied the undercurrents of ambition and rivalry. I navigated through the crowd, each step a calculated measure of my resolve, each exchange a prelude to the climax of this orchestrated unveiling. He was there, Laura's lover, his presence as unwelcome as it was inevitable. He moved through the throng with a self-assuredness that made my skin crawl, ignorant of the net closing around him. I watched as he laughed, a sound that grated against my senses with a familiarity that was both infuriating and liberating. My gaze flickered to Laura, her features carefully composed as she engaged in polite conversation, the mask she wore flawless in its execution. Yet beneath the surface, I could see the tension coiling within her, the knowledge that this evening would mark the end of the charade we had maintained for far too long. As the evening progressed, I could feel the heartbeat of the room change, a subtle shift that signaled the moment of truth was upon us. With a steadiness born from weeks of preparation, I approached the center of the room, my presence drawing curious glances as I took my position. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying across the room with a clarity that silenced the gathered crowd. Thank you for indulging me, but there is something that must be addressed, something that requires the light of truth. The room fell silent, anticipation hanging in the air like a taut string ready to snap. I felt Laura's eyes on me, a silent plea woven within their depths, one that I could not heed. This was not just about her or me. It was about reclaiming my life from the ashes of deception. I unfolded the documents, the evidence painstakingly gathered and meticulously arranged, and laid them bare for all to see. Photographs, financial records, messages, each piece a testament to the betrayal that had poisoned our lives. Gasps rippled through the assembly, whispers rising like a tide as reality sank in. My eyes locked onto those of Laura's lover, watching as the color drained from his face, the mask of confidence slipping as the magnitude of exposure struck him like a blow. He searched for a way out, a lifeline amidst the sea of condemnation, but found none. There is no justification for betrayal, I continued, my words sharp, cutting through the fabric of pretense with surgical precision. But there are consequences, and tonight, we confront them. Laura stood frozen, her composure crumbling under the weight of the moment. Tears shimmered in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the ruin laid before her. Yet, instead of satisfaction, I felt a pang of regret, a recognition of the shared culpability in the decay of what had once been a sacred bond. The fallout was swift, brutal, whispered accusations, shattered reputations. Laura's lover, his corporate facade now a ruin of his own making, faced the storm with desperation clawing at his throat. The veneer of respectability lay in tatters, the truth a relentless force that could no longer be denied. As the echoes of revelation faded, I stepped back, the weight of the night's events settling upon my shoulders. The path of revenge had reached its zenith, yet within the Pyrrhic victory was a sense of release, a freedom from the chains of deception that had held me captive for so long. Laura approached, her expression one of harrowing understanding. We stood together, two souls laid bare in the aftermath of betrayal, our future uncertain but our past unshackled from its lies. In her eyes, I saw the remnants of the love we had once shared, now a fragile shadow amidst the wreckage. Richard, she whispered, her voice a tremor against the silence. I held up a hand, stopping her words before they could take form. No more? I said softly, a gentle resolution threading through my voice. We move forward, from here, from now. With those words, the chapter of revenge came to a close, leaving behind the echo of what had been and the promise of what could be. As I turned from the room, the burden of justice gave way to the hope of renewal, each step a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, to rise, to rebuild, and to find new strength in the face of life's deepest betrayals. The remnants of the evening's confrontation lingered like a fading echo, a symphony of repercussions still resonating within the silence of my home. As I stood in the dim light of the living room, the reality of my actions settled over me, a mixture of relief and sorrow woven into the tapestry of my consciousness. The weight of revenge, once a driving force, now seemed to dissipate, leaving behind a strange emptiness I hadn't anticipated. Laura's presence was a quiet one, her footsteps soft as she moved through the house, careful not to disturb the fragile peace that lay between us. The night had left us both exposed, our vulnerabilities now laid bare beneath the scrutiny of our own hearts. Yet, in the wake of confession, there was a semblance of clarity, a chance to redefine our lives, however uncertain the path forward might be. The children were asleep upstairs, their innocence a stark contrast to the turmoil that had shaken the foundation of our home. I felt a profound sense of responsibility toward them, an abiding need to shield them from the shadows of our choices. They were the light that guided my resolve, reminding me that amidst betrayal, hope for renewal existed, an opportunity to build anew on the ashes of what was lost. The envelope, now emptied of its damning contents, lay discarded, a relic of the past that had once consumed me. As I gazed at it, I realized that beyond the need for justice lay a greater truth, one that spoke of forgiveness, of moving beyond the confines of vengeance towards something resembling peace. Laura joined me in the living room, her presence tentative yet firm, as if each step was an offering, a gesture toward reconciliation, however fragile. We sat together, the silence stretching between us not as a barrier, but as a space for understanding to take root. "I'm sorry," she said at last, her voice a quiet plea, filled with the weight of things unsaid. "For everything. For the pain I caused you, caused us." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I let them sit untouched, absorbing the sincerity in her voice, the anguish that mirrored my own. Betrayal had left a scar, but within it lay the possibility of healing, an acknowledgement that we were both human, both fallible. "I know," I replied softly, meeting her gaze with a tempered resolve. "And I'm sorry too for my part in letting us drift, for losing sight of who we were." In that exchange, a fragile understanding formed, a recognition that the journey ahead would be one of rebuilding, of seeking new horizons not defined by the past, but by the choices we would make from this moment on. The path would be neither easy nor straightforward, but it was one we had to walk together, for ourselves and for our children. As we sat, the shadows seemed to recede, revealing the potential for something gentler, something forged in the fires of hardship yet tempered with compassion. We weren't the people we once were, and perhaps that was the point. As individuals, we must grow, must evolve, even if that meant confronting our darkest selves. The days that followed unfolded with a quiet determination, a resolve to reclaim our lives from the debris of betrayal. Laura and I embarked on a journey of healing, each step a testament to the commitment we'd made to ourselves and our family. Through counseling, through honest conversations, we began to unravel the complexities of our shared history, seeking to understand rather than to blame. In time, the burden of revenge slipped away, replaced by a burgeoning sense of possibility, a belief that from the wreckage, new life could emerge. Our home, once a battleground of unspoken tensions, echoed with laughter once more, as the children, blissfully unaware of the storm that had passed, thrived in the warmth of a renewed family bond. And as the weeks turned into months, I discovered a burgeoning resilience within me, a strength to face the future with open eyes and an open heart. I reconnected with friends, pursued interests that had lain dormant beneath the weight of past grievances, and found solace in the simple moments, the laughter of my children, the joy of a new day unburdened by the specters of vengeance. Laura and I, though scarred, found a new rhythm, a partnership not just of necessity but of choice, one that honored the complexity of our journey and the lessons we'd learned along the way. Trust, though not yet complete, was something we were committed to rebuilding step by deliberate step. The night of revelation remained a poignant chapter in our history, a reminder of the choices that had shaped us, yet not the definition of our future. We stood at a new beginning, enriched by our experiences, ready to embrace the possibilities that lay before us. For in the aftermath of betrayal and the catharsis of revenge, we had found something deeper, a shared humanity, a resilience forged in adversity, and the hope of new horizons yet to be explored. The shadows of the past would never fully disappear, but they no longer held sway over the promise of tomorrow. And with that understanding, we moved forward, hand in hand, into the light of a new dawn.